Quilombo that created the biographical dictionary of intertwined histories of Afrodiasporic women, published by Editora Mari and Floop in partnership with Futura Channel, which is broadcasting our event. Sumiu. Which are the main challenges faced by these women in science and literature from these trajectories of researchers such as Carla Cutirelli, Joana Dark Félix, Lélia Gonzalez, Hildegara de Jesus, Maria de Lourdes, and Maria Lourdes de Nascimento. We're gonna start with this roundtable, scientists and poets. I call Letícia Rocha, Ana Maria Benite, Amanda Castro, Janira Miranda, Maria de Deus, Camila de Souza, and Janaíse Netos. Mediation by Tânia Rezende. Please, warm welcome to them.
Bom, então,
So let's call the ones who are here actually for now. Camila. Thank you, Camila, for being here. Anna. Ana Maria Canabarro Benite. Thank you, Anna. Um, Jana Easy. And Leticia. Leticia Rocha. Thank you, Leticia. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for your contribution.
vamos
So let's start this panel, this roundtable about intertwined narrative with women in poetry and science. Our first narrator of this intertwined stories, Camila Souza, who wrote the biography of Mariana dos Reis, the first woman to publish a novel in Brazil, a black woman, an abolitionist novel. Camila, it's up to you. Thank you for your collaboration. Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Before starting my speech, I'd like to thank especially, well, the real reason why I'm here is because I was particularly invited in collaboration with Scrita, Professor Thais Alves Marinho. The reason I'm here now is totally because of her. And this writing happened together with her. So I thank you, Thais Marinho. And I recognize that your heart is huge. Thank you. I also thank Professor Rosinalda and to Floopy because I am here, with you, sharing knowledge, highlighting the black side of this history, and sharing what I could research with Professor Alves Marinho. My author is called Maria Firmina dos Reis, and before I introduce them, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a black woman, Camila, pedagogue, historian. I teach at the at public schools. I am a historian at the Catholic University. I was a fellow 100% pro-uni fellow, and it was thanks to the system of quotes I could study in the history program. I could study history at the university, and that's why I came across Maria Firmina dos Reis. I come from the Northeast, and by studying literature, I came across Maria dos Reis. Besides the fact that she's a songwriter, she's a poet, she's a songwriter. She allowed us to write during the slavery. She was born in 1822. She went through very troubled periods, but through writing, she could give us an idea of how this period was. And why is she considered the first literary author with content anti-racist? Because she wrote the book Ursula in 1959. She brought to us through her writing the vision of the black man and the black woman, where people who were in that specific moment of history was benefited by her speech, so that they could, through literature and through writing, they could say how this slavery period was. So through her writing, through her book Ursula, and then there is a moment during this book in which she talks about the enslaved as a protagonist of the story. So, as both Germany could think, this she came with this revolutionary attitude of placing the black men and the black women as protagonists of her book. So Maria Firmina dos Reis was a professor. She founded a mixed school, which was considered impossible during slavery, because at that time boys and girls were separated, so they could not, get in touch with each other, because girls were educated to be domestic workers and take care of the house, and men were educated differently. And so Maria Firmina came into this moment to change this perspective and created a school with boys and girls in the same space. And unfortunately, due to slavery, she could not go on with this school, and this school was closed. But she kept on acting as a teacher, teaching these black kids, sons and daughters of enslaved men and women, even in her house, even when she was sick, even when she was already in pension. And beyond these writings, she had her nicknames, Maranhense, and she was identifying herself as a daughter of a enslaved woman. So she was writing under the nickname of Maranhense, and I identify myself with it because I also came from Maranhão. I am a Maranhense as well. So there were also other writings, songs that she wrote. She wrote the Freedom Anthem in 1888 when abolition occurred. She wrote tales, poems, and I could focus especially in this tale, The Slave, A Escrava, the enslaved woman. She wrote it in 1887, 1 year before the abolition, and she was more mature, older, and she could tell us through her writing, through her words, she could give us context of what was that slavery period. So she could describe in a few pages a dialogue that happened within a white people's context, if she, in telling us if how they were decided to end up or not in slavery. And she made so that many people in that space serving, many black people serving the white people, they could come on board and be part of this dialogue. And this dialogue was going on, taking us to the imaginary space and transporting us to this period in which slavery occurred, describing what black women and black men were going through, the racist speeches, the economic intentionality behind. So she could bring all those elements and assimilate them to the black and men and women, and making so that they could have their voices inside within her writing. And inside this book, there is this observation because by reading we understood that she left, let's say, a possibility that she would be inclined to her friend Terezinha, that you know we understood that they could might have had a relationship, we understood it that indirectly by her poems. So I leave you to this reading. There's this poem, and somehow through this reading, you understand that this relationship might have happened. That she was maybe interested in her friend Terezinha. So buy the book, read it, and try to understand if she was really interested in her friend Terezinha. Through her poems. Buy the book and you will find out if she was in love with Terezinha or not. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you, Leticia. Wonderful. Did you know about Maria Firmina? Or are you willing to get to know more after Leticia's speech? Oh, Camila, sorry, it's Camila. Buy the dictionary. So the second collaboration for this intertwined narratives, it's Ana Carvalho Benite. She wrote about Joana d'Arc Felix. Thank you once more, Anna. It's up to you now. Well, good afternoon, all of you. I'd like to thank Professor Rosinaldo, Professor Thais. Thank you very much. I'm so proud of being here with you. I'm Carioca. I was born in Duque de Caxias. So being able to go back to my state and look at this state from a very different perspective is something that really makes me emotional. So congratulations. You could gather a very important team of women that can look at each other and write together. And my text is about a friend, a scientist called Joana d'Arc Felix. I don't know if you remember, but I don't know if you know who Joana is. I'm gonna tell a little bit, and then you buy the book, right? And Joana is a friend, as I told you, and this narrative happens as a demonstration, a protest against silencing, against the lynching that happened to Joana. I work at the University of Goiás and I direct Tia Ciata's collective, and we have a project that uh, boosts, that stimulates Black girls to study math and other sciences. And we have a curricula within this university with 4 students regarding chemistry, biology, mathematics, and instead of teaching from these perspective of universal subjects, they talk about concepts. They start studying Black scientists, contemporary Black scientists. And that's how we arrived to Joana. She works at a technical school in Franca. She was born in Franca. She was born there in this village and lived in this village. And her family was not well seen. Joanna nowadays works in this technical school. She studied, and she researches together with her students, and the students receive royalties for transferring technology, which means that they have they have 14-year-old, 15-year-old children receiving a high amounts of money because they are transferring and creating technologies and creating patents. They have patents in in cement to glue bones. She created patents of skins that are used to produce bags, luxury bags, and they use the skin of fishes, the skin of chicken that we eat in our houses. And this scientist was lynched. I don't know if you remember this, but there were dolls inside the Museum of Tomorrow representing the black scientist with the face of Joanna. And why? And they disappeared. And why these dolls disappeared? Because she was condemned because she lied about having a Harvard postdoc. I personally doubt that she claimed to have a Harvard's PhD if she didn't have it. But you know how it is. The media chooses someone as a to highlight, to praise. Media chose her. She was, praised. She was interviewed in TV shows. There was a film that would tell her story, and suddenly, out of the blue, she was forgotten. And I hope she's, here. She's watching me and listening to us here. She was forgotten. She was seen as a liar, and everything she developed, this amazing scientist, everything she produced was hidden, was erased, and understood as a lie. But her students still earn high high royalties for these technologies that they produce, and she's still being awarded because of these technologies. And I've listed all the awards she received before she was erased, before she was canceled, because that's what happened to her. And there are other Joannas, there are other black scientists, there are causing revolutions in our country, distributing, sharing income from spaces that we never thought of occupying, such as technological production, something that arrives to people's houses in a very short period of time. And this is happening by other means, by other hands, by other people. Joana was with us in Goiás for Investiga Meninas program, my program, and she taught girls from outskirt schools how to work with uh, how how to work with leather and produce their own bags. So we have girls working with this in their neighborhoods. And this was taught by a black scientist in Brazil that was forgotten, that was massacred, that was, that became a joke for people. This is so sad. I would like you, if you are from Rio, especially, go to Museu da Manhã, the Museum of Tomorrow, ask for the doll. The doll was placed there during a very interesting ceremony, and then she was totally erased. So I'd like us to use this book, this entry, this moment to remember of something that we cannot do, we were how we were how we did not defend one of ours, and how this made so that all work done, all the income that was distributed, all the technology that was produced as a doubt, and make so that she's not going to be visible and she will not receive more funds for going on with her research, for promoting her research. So at the same time as we accept this media speech, we don't notice how this media narrative buries us. So I invite you to read this book. I invite you to, promote this dictionary and tell these stories to other girls and boys so that our boys and girls grow up with references about our own productions and knowing how we can transform the world we live in. Thank you. Foi?
Have you heard about Joana d'Arc? Did you know the story? Okay, I'm gonna tell you again by the dictionary. And let's hear what Professor Ana Delite said. I think it's so difficult to find an event with such wonderful lectures. Now we are going to hear Janaíse Batalha Neves that narrated a little bit of the story of Vera Lúcia Rodrigues Duarte. Tell us, Janaíse. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. In the first moment, I'd like to ask permission to all the ancestrality, the elders, the youngsters, and many years ago, many centuries ago, our steps come from far behind. And I'd like to thank Rosie. And today, I thought, what a wonderful event. And they told me also that I have to naturalize being part of this intellectuality, of this literary movement. I'm Janaíse, known as Janaíse, known as Jana. I come from the outskirts of Rio Grande do Sul, Pelotas, and I belong to the Federal University in our city. And I need, before I talk about the woman I wrote about in this biography, I'd like to talk a little bit about the place where I come from. Because for us, it's very important to be in this and occupy these spaces. So I come from the state of Rio Grande do Sul, the city of Pelotas. When we talk, I'm from Pelotas, I'm Gaúcha from Rio Grande do Sul, people used to ask us, but are there black people there? So there are. So first of all, I like to reverberate this place where we talk from, spreading knowledge. And I was talking to the girls before. It's very important to see that our stories, they connect themselves. My story is not very different from the story of the girl from Bahia, from Goiás, from Rio. How much our struggles, they permeate in all country, no matter the state where we are. So this is going to reverberate our struggle. So I come from Pelotas, a city from Rio Grande do Sul, and to give you a context of where I come from, I'm going to tell you some figures. In 1834, the population of Pelotas is of 10,860. And among this number, 500, 620 are enslaved people, 1,000 free, and 600 indigenous. At this moment, we only have 3,911 white people. In terms of percentage, if I count the enslaved, free, and indigenous, I have 63.80% of the population. So when I talk to Pelotas, Rio Grande do Sul, people have this image that there are no black people there. No, we have a lot. In particular, my city was built by the hands of the enslaved people. So it's very complicated to think and to speak from this place where I come from and think of the production of black women. This is so strong. Even more strong is to know that we are also following the legacy that has already been left to us. So, uh, how much our ancestors, how much they struggle for not being invisible, and how much we are still struggling here. So, I came here to talk a small and brief part of this book that is fantastic. I start saying, open the doors of the event because the griots are arriving. This was the request of Vera de Mojongo. She is from São Lourenço do Sul, also a city from Rio Grande do Sul state, very meaningful. The presence of Italians, the Italian immigrants, and Polish. So, a very white city, and that really the black population, as in many places, invisible. So, thinking about that, very in 2001, she starts to do. She's a woman, daughter of Iemanjá, 3 kids. She idealizes the campaign of Afro culture in Rio Grande do Sul. Since 2001, we have it. So because of the lack of sponsor, it doesn't happen so frequently, but it's still there, and it's marked by the people from São Lourenço do Sul, a place that there are many beaches. It's a coastal place, also touristic, but doesn't have this visibility and valorization of the black population. So she founds this campaign with a whole structure that is concentrated in black culture, black poetry, black creative production. So Verinha is an activist, as well as it happened to me, from a terreiro de Umbanda. From there, we have our first social movement, black social movement, and the first contact that we have with this black social movement is from the terreiros. So Verinha, besides being the idealizer of this campaign and all this social movement, she is also a member of the carnival, the local carnival. She is from the Angola nation in São Lourenço. She's the Daughters of Ghana. Uh, she is an activist, participant of all these movements that make all difference in this place, where we try to make different, and show that from this movement, the youngsters, they can see it's possible. There are possibilities. So Verinha contributed with this place of literary, artistic, and cultural production, reminding you that Rio Grande do Sul is a place of black people that produce and that deserve and need the valorization, need to be valued, and also a retortation, right?
Obrigada, maravilhosa.
Wonderful. Thank you. One more story that we have to dig into. And once more, let's look for the dictionary. And thank you also for you bringing this data about Rio Grande do Sul. It's very important for us to be aware of it. And you bring information that this that replaces what we already think. You know, you talk about corporate side. You deconstruct knowledge that we already know. So Kachakochirene is the next one. I greet all of you here in our wonderful ancestral Mrs. Nascimento. I want to thank Professor Rosinalda and Professor Thais for this brave work of, because of this work of making visible the trajectories of Black women and give visibility to their writing as well. I'm talking about us, writers, And I was so happy to write about Carla Cocciani, which is a young feminist, Black young feminist in Brazil. And I want to start by quoting Carla Cocciani. She received this week our dictionary and she wrote the following in her social media. We open the portal with this epistemological delivery of love. Love is a tool that unites us. Uh, in the memory of our academic resistance against coloniality, me and my ancestrals think immensely. And I want to start by quoting her this beautiful sentence because the text written in this dictionary is entitled Carla Cocciani, the Intellectual of Affection. And I would like to say that these texts were written by me and by a friend of mine, Priscila Kikuchi. Both of us tried to write this text. She's a white woman and I am a Black woman. And whether you want it or not, reading Carla Cocciani provokes us and illuminates us when we talk about some issues. And from that, you know, the themes and about thinking our blackness on her whiteness and think about these situations made so that we had this idea of writing this entry and to notice the contributions that Carla Cuccirini gave to us in Brazil when it comes to feminism, Black feminism, the intersectionality, and the struggle, the anti-racist struggle in Brazil. So within this structure, this framework, and this social structure, this racist, patriarchal, misogynistic, and also very colonialist. And that's why we started to talk about Carla Cuccirini. So I want to bring you some data about her in a very superficial way because I know that you're going to buy the dictionary and this is a tip for you, buy it. So I'm going to bring you some data and to give you a context and an idea of who Carla Coccirini is. She's from Oshun. She belongs to the Candomblé religion. She was born in Salvador de Bahia, of Bahia, in May 1980. She has a very beautiful journey. She started working in Ileaie as cordeira, which are the people who rode the ropes during the carnival, so that you can, separate and protect the ones who are parading in the streets. She has a degree in social science and she has dedicated her life to attention to women who live and are subjected to domestic violence, especially Black women. And you have to remember that these are the majority who are subjected to domestic violence. And she's master and PhD in interdisciplinary studies about women, gender, and feminism from the São Paulo University. At the moment, she has 3 publications, and until the moment we were writing the entry, she hadn't finished her PhD. But now she has 3 publications, and maybe the most well-known book of hers is this book called Intersectionality. And in this book, she, retrieves this memory of ancestry, and to talk about intersectionality. And she has a second book, which is a result of her master thesis about the prison, the black women in prison in Bahia, especially Salvador. And the third book is the result of her PhD, and she analyzes the audiences, the court, uh, the audiences in court. And she also developed, and she gives a lot of lectures and courses and workshops about issues that she believes are important, and she reflects about these issues. And the differential, what she brings, what she can add up to, is that she brings her reflection from what she believes in. And she talks about terreiros. It's an epistemology that she creates. She retrieves this thought of Brazilian women that came before her: Beatriz Nascimento, Sueli Carneiro, for instance, Lélia Gonçalves, and so many other women that she invites to this discussion. And she also invites Afro-American women, such as Angela Davis, Patricia Rio Collins, Africans such as Eureke Wilmi, Latin Americans. So she invite these women on board to dialogue with us, intellectual women, and that are still, creating history, that are still doing history. So this is her work, the work that she has been doing in the last years, retrieving, building, and deconstructing in terms of Brazilian context, and also provoking, also destabilizing. And all of this, when from a very effective standpoint, the way Carla Cotirene reflects, and the way that she, works on her intellectuality is with affection, to get to people's hearts. And she addresses issues that affect us regarding Black women bodies, Black communities' bodies, but from a very interesting standpoint. And just, to conclude, how Claudia Cotirene contributed to our discussion in terms of intersectionality in Brazil. And from my standpoint, we know that studies about intersectionality are present in many spaces. It's a category that is being disputed. And Carla Cotirene, she lands in this historical floor with this intersectionality. And I believe that she contributes a lot in this sense to intersectionality. She brings to the center of the discussion the life, the bodies, and also denounces and reports these oppressive systems, this in terms of race, in terms of gender. And as an intellectual, and I believe that all of us as intellectual women are working in this academic field, Black people in universities, they provoke the universities, the academy, and Katia Kochireni has been doing it, and all of us with our bodies provoke the universities, the Brazilian universities. They are still very colonial, and we look for, through our knowledge, through our struggle, through our resistance, will aim at shaping this universities, this academy, bringing up other means of knowledge that can deal with our realities, that's big of our realities. So I advise you again to buy the book again, and I thank you again for you being here listening to me. I'm open to questions and concerns. Wonderful, Leticia. I'm really interested in getting to know more about Katia Kochireni. And Leticia has already given you this advice. Buy the dictionary, read it. And if you want to know more about these four wonderful women here with me, you can later on research on their lives and write about them. Create an entry about them, about each of them, because you can also create a biography of them for the next dictionary. So thank you so much, girls. I made a mistake. I forgot to mention Morgana Abrantes, who wrote this entry with me, so I want just to correct myself. Thank you. I'm gonna ask you to stay there together because I'm gonna call the next panel, the next researchers, and then we're gonna open for questions. Thank you, kisses. Well, now let's receive here with us Maria Neves, Jardins de Deus. Amanda Mota Castro. Janira Sodré Miranda. And I am still here. De Andrade. Amanda is here. Thank you for your collaboration. So let's talk about these wonderful women. And let's start with Amanda Mota Castro, who wrote about Lélia Gonzalez. Oh, hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of you who are here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And more than a pleasure, it's incredible to be here because I'm a contemporary, of course, but we come from a period in which we didn't have quotes, we didn't have uh, vacancies in university dedicated to Black people. I was the only Black people in my center working in my PhD, and we see a transformation in another possible world that is ongoing right now. So it's very incredible to be part of these incredible moments, these periods that started, these changes that started before us. It's so emotional, so emotive, and we humbly take part in this movement that started before us. And we had Luisa Bairros, for instance, that was during the progressive governments. She signed all the policies. She was there. These days I was, giving a class about this woman and I started to cry. What an amazing person. A person that that shouldn't die. She should live at least 100 years. So I wrote in the super dictionary, and I am a person, as you mentioned before, a little bit older than you, and we like to handle the paper with in our hands. And when people say that the schedule is online, I like paper. And together with my student that is not my student anymore, she already discussed her thesis. Gabriele Costa, who was here yesterday, and we created this entry about Lelia Gonzalez, and I'm a feminist, and Lelia has a very special place for me in my life. Lelia was a feminist woman. She starts to write. She writes in the 90s, and people ask her, what's feminism? What it is to be a feminist? Being a feminist is being aware of your condition of woman. And for me, she summarizes exactly what feminism is. And logically, the struggles, the fights of the peripheral communities for a better life. And she says that we need to be aware, we need to be conscious of our place, and be conscious of our place so as to go beyond it, beyond of this historical place that was determined already for to be occupied by peripheral communities. And Lelia Gonzalez has never been a woman that, and she arrived to a place where no other Brazilian black woman arrived before. No Brazilian woman could speak 3 languages, be part of intellectual roundtables discussing democracy, classified as racial, in Brazil during the dictatorship. So, in fact, she arrived to no one has ever arrived before. And how does she do it? First thing, she gave the best of herself every day in her life. She was the best. And I was with her son last week, and he was talking about it. He said, Amanda, mom, she was not a point outside the curve. She was actually, in another curve, in another street, in another dimension. Yes, that's true. She was in another curve, making history. And she has always, highlighted that in the Chieti State University where she studied, and not for coincidence, one of the first institutions to discuss affirmative policies in this country. And for this reason, it's an institution that where Chia Cincha is being attacked systematically, because this is an institution that did this, that discussed these issues. So Lelia has always been the professors and liked her at university because she was a black woman and very intelligent. So she knew that she had to be the best. And this reminds me this big concern that I have with the PhD program, because people want, to have a PhD. Do you really want to read this entry and go to the references and read everything that is in the references? That's about it. And she did this. She read the she read Simone de Beauvoir from the French directly. Isn't it amazing? She was fantastic. Something else, she created networks everywhere. Lelia Gonzalez created networks with black peripheral communities, but also with white people, with powerful institutions, and she was effectively together and creating this black social movement. And she was with all of these people creating these networks because she knew that racism is not our matter, our problem. We didn't create racism, and we didn't create this mess. So Lelia writes about the place of black and white men in Buenos Aires.
She knew that the white population also had to solve the problem they created. Besides that, Lelia had a great irony that is present and perceivable in all her works, texts, writings, and words in interviews. For example, as she says, as she reports about a reunion, a post-graduation reunion that had during the 80s in which she participated, we can perceive that. So Janaína was talking before, a woman that lives in a city where I work. I work in a campus outside of the headquarters. So I work at this place, São Lourenço do Sul, at the extreme south of the Rio Grande do Sul. So when I pass the exams and I move to the city, at the time we had the Cloutieri case. Cloutieri was a black woman who started a relationship with a white youngster also that came from Germany, I don't know how many years ago, the immigrants, and that he had a child, and Claudia Irene was pregnant again. And Claudia Irene disappeared. Everyone in São Lourenço was looking for this woman, a young woman. And a lot of people talked about this case when I got there. And I said, no, maybe she went to the capital city, to Porto Alegre. And police discovers that Claudia Irene was dead, was killed by this boyfriend, and that she was buried in his house's backyard. When they asked the mother of this young man, why did your son do that? The mother answered, we don't share lands with black people. It was in 2016 that this young woman was killed. And Lélia Gonzalez systematically is going to denounce this racism that kills black women in a systematic way in this country. And also, oh yes, I have to conclude. I've been in Curitiba last month. I was taking an Uber and the driver asked, where do you come from? I said, Porto Alegre. So he asked me, well, I didn't know Porto Alegre had black women. And I answered, no, there are no black women, only black men. So it was a kind of embarrassing environment because he looked at me, he didn't understand very much what I was talking about. And this I learned with Lélia. To live in this world, we have to have an irony and a capacity to struggle every day, knowing that as much as they can kill us, we are part of this world of science and we are here to stay. Thank you very much, Amanda. Another marvelous story for you to know, to read about, and to know more. We still have more stories to come. Now we are going to listen to Janira José Miranda, who wrote about Maria Beatriz do Nascimento. In this afternoon, I came to talk about the radical historical imagination of Maria Beatriz Nascimento, which moves me in a way that I cannot express. So when talking about the city that Beatriz loved as if it were her home city, July 12, 1942, in the city of Sergipe. Many authorizations that I give to myself to narrate the life of this woman from this place. The first one is that Beatriz, in his radical historical imagination, has brought to her world and universe all women of this country. In the traffic of the internal diaspora that her family made, in the exodus from Sergipe to Rio de Janeiro, considering the hegemonic view that this city has against the Northeastern family. I'm also from the Northeast. I'm also part of the Brazilian diaspora, but my family went to Amazonia. And in the trajectory of Beatriz Nascimento, I also find these authorizations to take the word and say that Beatriz, in the profession she chose and that she graduated in the Federal University, the Bachelor in History. And among so many women I see here, we are historians, academics, and I find myself in what you said because, Amanda, because Beatriz didn't find very normal to see so few women in this academic world. I was an academic in the last millennium in the Federal University of Roraima and the only black woman in the department, in the professor's department. But Beatriz Nascimento, with her radical historic imagination, has brought us to the future. And I'd like to talk about possible future, imaginable futures for the black population in Brazil based on the Afro-futuristic fabulation that we can find in Beatriz Nascimento's ways of thinking. First of all, about possible futures, I'd like to say that people that cross us in the processes deserve our gratitude and public words of gratitude. So first of all, I'd like to thank the direction and production of Floop for inviting me, the founders of the Helfete, which I take part in a very honorable way, and I'd like to thank in a particular way the people that biographed Beatriz Nascimento before me, acknowledging authorships, references, and reminiscences that I could use to write this entry. I mention Raquel Barreto, Wagner Nascimento, and my dear friend Alex Hattis, that first brought in the book I Am Atlantica to Brazil the recovery of Beatriz thinking that slept for a long time in the memory of this nation that didn't publish or edited black women in a consistent way during Beatriz Nascimento's life.
I'd like to mention this woman that again her biographers in a time where she had already left this territorial tie when she was not anymore here with us. And I want to mention the woman that walked among us, feeling, noticing all the things that she considered strange within this racial operation and highlighting the racial complex racial issues in this country that denounced the epistemic racism before the concept emerged, that used her imagination, her historical imagination in a text that I read as a prayer every time to talk about the black men and women. And she asks if we could tell the human story without starting to tell the history in Europe and how it started in Europe. How would that be? So I would like to read for you this chunk of text, these lines of Beatriz Nascimento, because I want to share them with you today from a metaphor. When Beatriz took part in Rio of many events, she loved the urban scene. She didn't like the domestic space, and she was constantly. Her friends were also constantly saying that she was a person that would address the issues at that moment. She would never take them home, and I would like to say that she met her partners, generational partners, Abdias Nascimento, Beatriz Gonzalez, Lélia Gonzalez, Conceição Evaristos, many other remarkable ones that are still alive, and she would be 83 years old today. And by mentioning her partners, I'd like to say that Conceição Evaristo said that Beatriz did not take her issues home, and other people would say that she was, a very prominent figure passing by. And I'd like to talk about her fantastic historic imagination when she was taking part at the 1,000 people demonstration, the demonstration of the 1,000 people. I was against the dictatorship, but in the demonstration of the 1,000 people, but when I was there, from my imagination, I left that demonstration for a while, and she built a perspective about this public about this public scenario where in which she was inserted, in which she was working through transformations. And she's not found in this practice, in this narrative, because she was unveiling this racial operation in Brazil in all political spaces, including in that particular demonstration, from this notion of this imaginary exiting, especially talking about this demonstration of the 1,000 people and about the academic production in Rio with all the epistemologically killing ongoing at that time, a set of thoughts that is plural and broad, multifactorial, multi-language. She's a poet. She's a film writer, researcher, archive researcher. She was a traveler when she was, doing her transatlantic trips to Africa. And she's the founder of the notion of Quilombism as a continuity from the past, present, transversal, within all the Black experiences where Black community is, all the spaces. And she places the Quilombo in a place of peace and not war. And this is the idea that I want to bring as central towards another direction. And Beatriz constitutes the role of Black women in Brazil in her text, Solidão da Mulher Negra, Black Women's Solitude. And it's so contemporary. It was created as a concept in Brazil by Beatriz, and she calls the attention to the fact that this solitude is not only effective, but a solitude in terms of power of a woman that could lead her context, her family, her spaces to the future. And by mentioning future, I want to talk about this historical imagination that considered possible futures for Black people, saying that if Beatriz met her partners, she found her biographers who today are here and I am part of them. And it is a gift for me having written this biography and having Floop paying tribute to her and having her as a leading figure of the event and bringing me here to talk about this amazing woman that is part of so many parts of my life. And I conclude by saying that there is an evolution ongoing of Beatriz Nascimento's program to the Brazilian society. I want to be every time more part of this future program of Beatriz Nascimento for the Brazilian community. And Maria Jardim de Deus is with me conducting this project of decolonizing the Uri. And this is very evolutive, this idea of decolonizing the Uri. And I'm part of this Black Historians Network that conducts today this thought, this thinking of this post-abolitionist thinking that is a very practical concept. It's a network that organizes researchers and institutions towards a history made by Black people. So, Beatriz, you are among us. Amado. Thank you. She is reading a poem right now.
Nasci segura em mãos experientes entre sábias. Coisa viva animada no caminho toquei com essa grito de terror diante da treva. Senti-me segura. Rosos, leite, doce, pão e mel em abundância. No caminho, topei com a terceira pedra. Grito de terror diante de ser, senti-me insegura.
Mediator Tânia Rezende is reading a poem.
Organização de Alex Hatz.
I felt inspired by your words, and poems are never enough. So after this, our author, that is being to whom we are paying this tribute, it's never enough to hear from her. So let's hear from Maria das Neves, who narrated Maria de Lourdes Teodoro. Thank you. Good afternoon, guys. I don't know what to say after these two women, you know. So I'd like to start by asking permission to the younger and the older and saying that participating at this moment is, and of this book, above all, being here with both supervisors of my life university, and having the organization of other two supervisors of my life, we sit down and we brush hair together. So thank you, Rosinaldo and Thaís, Janira Sodré, Tânia Rezende. I created this entry about Maria de Lourdes Teodoro together with Ludmila Pereira de Almeida. And we created this movement from the Gira Olegária de Jesus, coordinated by Professor Tânia Regina, because we understood that we had to bring Black women from Goiás to the scene. And we started with some entries about these women, amongst which Maria de Lourdes Teodoro. And today, at the age of 78 years old, still works as psychoanalyst in Brasilia, addressing Afro-Brazilian issues and a communitary psychoanalysis. So Maria de Lourdes Teodoro was born in 1946 in Flores de Goiás, and right after, when Brasilia was being built, she, moves to Brasilia with her family. And Maria de Lourdes Teodoro, still as a teenager, together with other students, publishes her first poetic anthology. And Maria de Lourdes Teodoro goes starts to study letters and self-taught herself French, studied French alone, and gets married. She has her kids, and she studies a master course at Sorbonne. Take her kids to Sorbonne in France, being already a widow, and then she goes back to Brazil, goes to the University of Brasilia, starts to work as a professor there. Then she goes back to Harvard, and and gets her PhD degree in psychoanalysis and arts. Maria de Lourdes Teodoro is a contemporary of Lélia Gonzalez and Abdias Nascimento. They worked together, and we included a partnership between Africa and Brazil, and she was responsible for this proximity, coming and going, taking the Brazilian culture to Africa and back, and doing it with Lélia. So she, starts to travel back and forth to Africa, go to Burkina Faso, and every time she travels to Africa is to address a bigger project with her contemporary partners. And in Brazil, she cooperated with Quilombos, one of the biggest communities. Quilombolas, in terms of territory, is territory Calunga in Goiás. She's the mediator to bring benefits to this Calunga territory too. So Maria de Lourdes Teodoro, I told her, I made a joke. I said she's a woman of the world. She didn't accept that very well, but I go on saying that she is a woman of the world from the countryside of Goiás. And I usually say that the periphery supports the world, sustains the world, and all of us, and takes us to a better place. A place of more quality, authenticity. And this woman, Maria de Lourdes Teodoro, she participated at the construction of Lélia Gonzalez Prize, and she was a researcher at the IP Afro Institute together with Abdias and Lélia and other contemporary figures of her time. And I'd like to highlight her generosity. When I was studying letters at the university, I researched quickly in Google poets in Goiás, and I suddenly identified her. I had never heard about her before. I had never heard at that time. And when I was writing this entry, I remembered her. And I contacted her. She was still working a lot. And we wrote the entry. We used to write it at night around 11 p.m. And she was Maria de Lourdes was calling me at that time. She was really available. We worked together several days through video calls, and she was always willing to help, very attentive, calmly. And that made me so happy, being welcomed by my older sisters. It's very good. It warms my heart and makes me want to go on. This entry for us to start to talk about Maria de Lourdes Teodoro. I have to say that this woman that created so much and even more is invisible. We don't talk much about her. Today, she dedicates herself to psychoanalysis in Brazil. In Brasilia. She lives in Brasilia. And to conclude, I'd like to say that I'd like to elaborate a little bit of what she said to me when I asked her, how would you like to be introduced to people? And she said, I think the best homage you can pay to me is to open a round table to talk about trips, identity, self esteem, research, education, sensibility in Brazil. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Very good. She's so young. Yeah, she's so young and doing a lot already. The young girls teaching us how we do things. So it's my time, right? It's up to me. I have to say, I have to, speak about Leodegária de Jesus with so much love. Leodegária Brasília de Jesus. She was born in August 8, 1889, in Caldas Novas da Rainha, where we have waters that cure, legend says. And I was almost burned in this water. I think this water has something different. And she was born in August 8, the day dedicated to Saint Leodegario, a priest that had his tongue cut out because he was speaking a lot, too much. And he was canonized. And so they used the name of the priest because he had his tongue cut out. It was a good decision. And Leodegaria, that was named after this priest, she, walked around because we are diasporic, and she ended up in Goiás because at that time, Goiás was the capital of the state of Goiás, and now we have Goiânia as capital. And she stayed there until she became an adult, and she really wanted to study law. And for that, she had to go to the Liceu school. She was brilliant as a student, one of the best, but she wasn't approved at the admission exam to the Liceu and then to access the law academy where you had only men. It was a struggle, a fight that made her father sick because he was a black activist. and Hildegarda, a black woman. And as they were fighting and struggling, when she was 16 years old, she published a book of poems. Hildegarda, at 16, was the first woman in that state to publish a book of poems. A black woman, and the state of Goiás wanted to recognize her. No, of course not. A black woman being recognized as the first to publish a book of poems in this state of white people. Everyone there, very white like me, with green eyes like mine, with blonde hair like mine, never, never accepted, never recognized her. Her father got sick, and since she was a child, she was taking care of people. She moved to other cities with her father, looking for treatments to her father until he passed. As she founded schools and newspapers, raised her younger sister, mothered other women that needed to be mothered, took care of children, sued. She was a professor too, and sued and wrote and taught, published, but with never good enough to represent the state and the city. She could not. She remained unknown. Nobody spoke about her until we appeared in the scene and we started to talk about her. And we opened this uh, place of unknown where the unknown people are, this well of unknown people. And people started to realize that she was important. And the white people just suddenly started to talk about her. And they created bookshops with her name, with her first name, because black people do not have, last names for them. And people started to say, perfect. Let them speak about Ludegara. But we in the letters department, a lot of young people, and I was there just to listen to them. And we had more young people, and they decided to create a group of women, and they were really determined. They had blood in their eyes, and they wanted to create a group of women, only girls, black, indigenous, quilombolas, travestis. They got gathered together and created the Olegaria de Jesus group, and things started to happen at that moment. We published a book, and during the pandemics, crying, we wrote a book with tears. We published the book in 2022, 2021, 22, 22. She has a good memory since she's young. And now we're publishing the second one. We're about to do it. Thank you. Madre Narrativa Serradeira, from the group Gira Leodegara de Jesus. You can find it in the network, available for free. You don't need to pay anything for it. What we want from you is that you read. Leodegaria was this huge woman, journalist, professor, sewer. She did everything. As we say in Goiás, she was doing everything. She's quoting the author.
Calma solidão sombria em que passo meus dias nebulosos. Sinto-me bem aqui, à sombra fria da saudade de tempos mais ditosos. Eu quero mesmo assim viver de lado das multidões passar desconhecida, me alimentando de algum sonho amado. Nada mais quero, a nada mais aspiro. Teu casto afeto que me doira a vida, meus livros, minha mãe, meu retiro. Muito obrigada pela escuta de vocês.
Thank you so much for listening to me. And we have some time here, to chat with this wonderful women, if you want to ask questions. Good afternoon. My name is Milena. Good afternoon, everyone here. Since you were so many, I have some fragmented questions. So beforehand, I apologize if I, mispronounce your name. Since you were so many, I might get lost in the process. But my first question is my first doubt, to Janira, it was talking about Professor Maria Beatriz do Nascimento, when you evoke the notion of radical imagination, historic imagination, confabulation, futuristic confabulation, these notions are what? They are concepts, they are analytic category, they are a methodology. What are they? It's the first time I hear these concepts, so I'm not familiar with them, and I don't really understand what they are. So if you could please elaborate on them a little bit more. And a bit before, I'd like to know from Camila, when she was talking about Maria Firmina dos Reis. I don't know if I got lost, but how did you come across Maria Firmina dos Reis? Why researching her? Why? Because you said when you started at the university, you understood yourself as a black woman. And I'd like to know how, during this process of meeting Maria Firmina dos Reis and this rediscovering and reaffirming this identity helped you in this process, this dialogue, And my last doubt, my last question is to Jana, talking about Vera Lúcia Duarte. And I'd like to know where you find yourself. You talk about literary production, but it's not clear if she's a intellectual producing science in terms of rational, let's say, in terms of epistemology, or in sense of poetic productions, literary productions. Thinking about not only describing realities, but possible futures. If you could talk about these spaces and why she's inside this field, in this round table today. Not to be long. That's all. Thank you for all of you.
Well, I think that in what you presented, there was an issue that was presented yesterday, like Lélia Gonzalez, and also Maria de Lourdes were psychoanalysts. And you brought the side of the poetry. And we know that Beatriz Nascimento started to write poetry during her treatment with her psychologist. And I'd like to know also, and an observation, they also use a lot of music. Lélia Gonzalez created the Afro groups, and also we have dance involved sounds. And I'd like to know, how do you bring to the dimension to understand these women this search for poetry and art as escape, and a way of existence and cure. And also, Maria de Lourdes, Lélia Gonzalez, also searching for a process of individual cure. And also, Maria Firmina was a composer. And I'm trying to find some of her music. And how do you cross art as something, not only a search for producing art, but also a process of cure? Thank you for your question. Her question meets what I wanted to ask. So I'm going to answer the first one, that was, when did I enter the history course? Well, I didn't identify myself as a black woman. A whole process helped me to acknowledge that I'm a black woman. I used to straighten my hair. I didn't wear colors and styles that are more have more to do with the African style and African culture. So I didn't acknowledge myself, understand myself, and I didn't have an identity as a black woman. So this process of acknowledging myself started in the history course, working with the process of Africanity, the identity of the black woman. Because first of that, the black culture wasn't emphasized. Only the slavery was studied, not much beyond that. So, by reading poetry and having the intention to search a black woman from Maranhão, I found some readings and rereadings of Maria Firmino dos Reis. And I really found myself in her, and I think she found me. So we met in identity. She's also from the Northeast. I'm a migrant also. I migrated to the state of Goiás with the intention of finding a good job, of studying, and there I saw my story emphasized and also written in the story of Maria Firmina and some of the women that is in this dictionary here. It's it's like reading my own story, recognizing myself in them. Thank you very much. I love the question because it's a long time speaking, but it complements what we were talking about. My great grandmother was a slaved woman. My mother and my grandmother, also domestic service, washing clothes, cooking. I'm saying that to say that I am in the academy from these quilombos, from these quilombos groups of which I feel part of. So sometimes I ask, do I deserve this space? And Jose used to say, naturalize these places as yours. I belong to this space of academy. But I don't put myself in this academy word to reverberate or to strengthen what hegemonically we find a white, Eurocentric, sexist production. So, this place of black women in the academy is to go against this hegemony, against the colonial. So, Anedo Jongo makes this a literary production, a production of a movement, and also a production in this campaign that we imagine, as she said, she reinforced this place in the southernmost part of the South. So that in the 70s, I was already an activist. So we are giving spoilers for you to buy the book. We talk about so many things there. So, of the African religion, she makes this construction a lot before we had this space to speak. So, in Rio Grande do Sul, a state acknowledged by Italo descendants and German descendants, as well as other Europeans. So, and we want to have an epistemology that in which, where as Black women in the academy, to acknowledge and to speak to so many other persons. Hello, there is a production, there is knowledge that are not validated. So, as Black researchers, especially Black women, we are not legitimized. We are not valued. The acknowledgement of our intellectual production, of our research, is also being checked. We also always have to explain ourselves being here to justify our belonging and our being these spaces. So I understand that this place in the academy is to give value, acknowledge, validate this knowledge that are not in the academy, but that dialogue with our knowledges and our research would be more or less like this. I like to thank you for your question. I'm going to answer you, but before this, I like to comment that I have a lot of insubordinations, a lot of insurgencies, a lot of repellences to the academic apparatus. I know people that could open their mouths and say that Beatriz Nascimento didn't have any production. I know some people. I don't know if you know. About me, they also said something. I'm saying this to also tell that no matter the repellences and insurgencies, I read a lot. I'm a reader of Beatriz Nascimento thinking, as well as Sueli Carneiro about epistemicide. So I think that your question has a lot of theoretical exits. I could talk to you about my thinking, my production that I'm developing together with the collective, the Blacks from Angola. But I'm working with a Brazilian and a North American. One of them is Dr. Tayara Lima from the Federal University that has been developing in Brazil the Afrofuturism thinking trend, possibilities and fabulation for a factable future outside the genocide, pointing to the future, dialoguing with the contemporary thought Beatriz Nascimento that has a poetry like a poem like this. I want a good past. Tayara Lim and Sadia Hart, the Afro-American that I mentioned, they are women from history that goes to the colonial archive, looks at the mess that essentializes eternally the black body as a enslaved body, that gives horror to the mind of Beatriz, saying, what can we read, re-signify from from the rests and the rooms of the colonial period? And how can we imagine a good past that points a future that is possible, ancestral, beautiful, that gives future to our descendants, that passed through us, they passed through us, and we are passing to the black girls. So there is a whole thinking process, especially in the science fiction and theory with technologies developed in the United States, in the black community, in the academy, North American Academy, and also in the area of the cinema where they are developing this tendency. Obviously,
It's to look backwards, it's a very personal perspective to think as a futurist. When I realized that she produced inside her historical imagination this future, to think about 1974 being a José Honório Rodrigues Fellow and become a refounder of Brazil's historiography, saying that Brazil needs a history that is protagonized by Black people. And I think this is Afrofuture. This is a possible future for us. And I think we will be there. And she's part of this process. And the reasons I mentioned before about psychological issues, it's a sensible issue. I was very economic about these themes and arts, whether it's poetic art or not, be it the themes of psychotherapies. These were themes that are in common in the writings of these three women. And to talk about evolution, we have Sinepi that gathers refounders of psychology and psychoanalysis to think about these themes. And I think this is why Beatriz Flup paid tribute to Beatriz Nascimento, for us to have these means, new tools to think of future. It's wonderful, but we ran out of time. We have to conclude, and from the deepest of my heart and soul, thank Rosinalda and Thais. Rosinalda, who invited it, Thais, who welcomed me to Flip's organization. I want to thank you all with so much affection. Thank Gira Leudegaria, because they welcomed me, they embraced me with this proposal. Kalina and Marcelene, because they were not part of the JIRA, but they are now. Thank you. You were already there. Thank you, and kisses to you and thank you very much.